Hey there, Captains. It's Reem again after a bit of a hiatus. I thought I'd come back for some of the big news that was announced today. There was some points changes and some errata, so I thought I'd take a look at what changed with GAR specifically, because that's mainly what I play, and then also, just how this will affect, I think, in general, how it'll affect the health of the game and the meta shakeup. So with that, let's just get right to it. So we're looking here at Rapid Reinforcements 2 and 1, but 2 was had some errata done to it. A lot of cards changed. I believe almost all the cards changed in some manner, except Governor Price, I believe, stayed the same. However, we're just going to focus on Anakin and Matchstick here. So Anakin used to be dealing a lot with salvos, adding dice to salvos, getting extra attacks with salvos. Now he's got a bit of a point buff, the 31, and he's a completely new Jedi, completely new commander. He now reads, while a friendly ship is attacking a ship, if the defender is at distance 1 to 5, at least two other friendly ships, one other friendly ship at distance 1 to 5 of the defender may spend one defense token. If it does, the attacker may reroll up to 3 dice. So it's kind of like a Lord Vader effect in Imperials, except it relies a lot more on having other friendly ships within range of your target. Kind of like Clone Gunners works. You need multiple ships within range, and here you're spending defense tokens instead of confire tokens. He's now the most expensive admiral that GAR has. He's definitely, in this form, I would say still playable, possibly competitive if you really like hammer in a list, hammer in like a lot of practice with it. I can see some potential for some like counselor swarms, like with X-Rax. I could see a Venator and counselors. I could see like double Venator, double Pelta. In the past, I've tried APT and Swivel Mount Clams. And there you don't have any rerolls really. So there's a couple options here. You can go swarm, you can go one large ship and a bunch of other small swarms around you, or I think you could try for like long range black crits with swivels. And also, since you're wanting stuff close together, maybe it has an option for gunnery teams, or not gunnery teams, clone gunners as well. So you're adding like 2 dice to your attacks, you're getting the reroll, you're hoping to trigger these special effects. I can definitely see a world where this Anakin's still played and still competitive. Right now, I'd say he's definitely playable. Competitive remains to be seen. He's definitely above Obi-Wan, I'd say for sure, but where he'll land exactly, I guess only time will tell. Matchstick is the other thing that we got in Rapid Reinforcements 2. Also received a change. He used to give other bombers rogue conditionally if they were within distance 1 and if they were not engaged. So it kind of allowed you to go all bombers and just kind of hope that you went against squadless or squad light and you could kind of wreck someone. Can't do that anymore. Now his ability reads, when a friendly ship resolves a squadron command, if they're in range to be activated, up to 3 of the squadrons with bomber it activates can be at distance 1 to 3 of you. So essentially it's relay, but only for ships with the bomber title. And he also got a point increase up 2 points from 14 to 16. I'd say he's still definitely usable. He's obviously not as good as giving Rogue out. But he's still a good squad, just not a great, awesome squad. In the past, a lot of people complained about the Rogue one. As long as you had some squads to tie stuff down, I didn't think it was too bad, but this definitely tones it back a bit and makes it so that squadless players aren't as punished. Because if you think about it, squadless, if you're flying squadless, your greatest fear before was probably like, what can you get? 8 YT 1400s in Rebels that are all rogue. That's probably your biggest fear, because if you go against carrier, if you go against the squadless, generally your plan would be to kill the carrier, and then hope to outrun the squads. So your biggest threat would have been those rogue 8 YT 1400s. With Matchstick, you're instead looking at like 10 black dice bombers potentially, which is quite a big, substantial difference than 8 black non-bombers. So it definitely toned it back. I think it was needed just because it was very oppressive. Like some people, I understand, just don't like squads. They just like flying squadless, and they can like deal with it by like killing carriers or whatever. And Matchstick was definitely like really pushing the boundaries of. It became really hard, I think, for squadless to be able to do anything. If you had squads, you just tied up Matchstick and or blobbed up his ball, because his ball was all heavy. It lost to like other 134s, but against squadless or squad light, it was kind of oppressive. So change is welcome, and I honestly think the ability for relay, it's still pretty good. I mean, the GAR I'd say has some of the best carriers, kind of in line with like the Quasar that the Imperials have, the Venator 2, pushing 5 just natively, plus all the upgrades you can put on it to push squads is awesome. Navuta B title, also really good. So you might not have to run the extra range. You can just run like expanded hangar base for extra commanding of squads, and you can use Matchstick to kind of like relay your bombers if you have to. And he's still 16 points, still a good deal for double brace. So instead of like kickback, you just take Matchstick into your bomber balls, and you'd have one more bomber with double brace and relay if you need it. Which, if you need it, it's good to have. So that's the two changes for GAR and Rapid Reinforcements. Definitely toned back GAR a bit. It was kind of quiet in the beginning, but past month or so, Anakin especially was starting to do well at tournaments as people are starting to pick him up and fly him. I flew him a bit in like test games for people. Like people are like, I'm getting ready for a tournament. Can you fly Anakin? I'd fly him, and I was just running a simple double Venator, double Pelta list, and the salvos and stuff was kind of oppressive. But we'll get on more into that, into the health of the game. So I think this is definitely healthier for the game. This is probably healthier for the game as well. Matchstick is still really good, and Anakin I think is fun, playable for sure, maybe even competitive. All right, let's go to the point change document. Point change document. There's only one point change that regards us Republic players here, and that was Tranquility. It went from 3 points to 7. I think that is a fine change. I've often joked in the past that Resolute and Tranquility, when they first were released, must have had their point cost switched, because Tranquility was, in my opinion, too cheap for what it did. It was an auto take. It kind of pushed out the other titles because, I mean, for 3 points, it was pretty obvious that Tranquility was the choice. Here, I think it gives some breadth to other titles, like maybe Resolute. If you don't have that one more point in your list, or it doesn't look as appealing to Tranquility at 7 points, maybe you're thinking Resolute, especially if you're playing like Bale. Just with extra dials resolving from the Bale dials, you can get like the extra repair tokens off Resolute pretty easily. Could work. And also with the Matchstick change, Triumphant title doesn't seem as bad either. In fact, let's look over at the Fleet Builder here. This is Ryan Kingston. Hasn't been updated yet. Changes are still fresh, but this would be 7 points now. So if you look at Triumphant, this one's all about while another friendly non-flotilla ship resolves a squad, up to 3 squadrons without adept that it activates can be at close range of you, even if the squadrons are beyond close to medium range of that ship. So with the new Matchstick, and you have Bomber Relay, all of a sudden it's essentially, because it was cleared up on the Discord and rules questions, I'm sure on the official forums it will be as well, is you can relay through this, to my understanding. So if Matchstick is within close of the Triumphant ship here, you can relay out. So theoretically, if you have like a mercy mission flying off on the other side of the board, you can have it commanding the squads through Matchstick around Triumphant, stuff like that. It definitely opens up, from it being super niche to, maybe there's something there with Triumphant and Matchstick. So that'll be exciting to see. And at 5 points, it's cheaper than Tranquility now. Where if you like look at the point cost now and what their effects are, it's like Tranquility was the obvious choice. So if anything, 7 points, I'd say makes the selection of the titles, especially between Resolute and Tranquility, a little bit more interesting. You'll maybe get some more variety in Republic fleets as far as vendors are concerned. And it's probably like fairer to the rest of the factions that this is a 7-point title because it's very efficient for what it does. You just guarantee all the shields come off. It's a very good defensive title. It should have a decent cost to it. So that's kind of a summary of all the GAR changes. I'm in favor of all of them. I think they were needed in some cases and, fine changes in the other one. They don't bother me at all. I checked some of my tournament lists, and the only thing that is changing there is I need to find like 4 more points for Tranquility in some places, and that's just like dropping kickback down to a torrent, or maybe I don't need X-Rax here. So, not a lot of fine tuning on our parts. If you're running Anakin, obviously those lists completely need to be reworked. Matchstick, if you're just doing 12 Y-Wings and Matchstick, that list needs to be reworked as well. But now, to the overall general feel of the game after these errata changes and points changes. I won't go into all of the changes that they made here, but just broadly speaking, what really excites me about the errata changes and rapid reinforcements 2 is that they cleaned up a lot of the cards. And what do I mean by that is when Rapid Reinforcements 2 came out, there was a lot of discussion on the forums about, what's this card do? What's that card do? We got to get in the rule forums. We got to get an official response from AMG. What's the intent behind this ability? Like, how do you salvo as an attack? That's not a defense. What hull zone is it from? Draven, how does his dials interact with tokens from this or that, or extra dials? There was a lot of muddied water about how stuff actually worked, and it led to a lot of you gotta go to the forums, figure it out. Even Matchstick, like a lot of these just had questions. Ventress had some questions on how she worked, and what Rapid Reinforcements 2 Errata did is it cleaned up all of the cards. I want to say after like reading through a lot of the discussion on the Discord, there's not a lot of questions about what these cards do anymore. They're pretty straightforward. And that is a good sign to me that as AMG puts out new material, it's kind of a lesson from Rapid Reinforcements 2, trying to keep the game clean. We are not going to have to, have this vault of interactions of, how cards work in certain scenarios against other cards. Trying to just make more straightforward answers that you just read the card and it's pretty clear on how they interact. You don't have to go deep diving into a rules form to see how they work. Which, especially as someone who's starting to get like more new players playing like physically in person at a local game store, just having that clarification, like trying to get new players in and they look at these cards like Anakin and you've just explained like how salvo works. Trying to explain how Anakin worked on top of that, or like Draven dials and stuff. It became, I'd say, a bit of a hindrance to new players, especially, and even at tournaments and stuff. If you haven't fought that commander yet, or it's the third game of the day, there's questions about how they work. Just cleaning that up in general is great. The willingness to go back and fix, air quotes, fix or clean up cards, clean up text that they've printed is also a really good sign to me. Adjusting point costs in just some cases. I believe Watts only changes that he decreased 2 points. Like, just doing a little bit of points balancing where they think it might be needed. It's all very excited. It's a great sign, I think, for the health of the game that they went in here. They cleaned up some of the fuzziness, like I said, dirty water that was going about at how things were worded, and made things pretty straightforward. A little bit of points cleanup, made Asajj actually more usable, got rid of some conditions, just more straightforward, easy to use. All really, really good. So, Rapid Reinforcement 2 Errata, love it. Don't have any problems with it whatsoever. I think it's great for the game. It shows great signs of what AMG is going to, at least what they're willing to do with the game now with cards and stuff. It's awesome. We'll go over to the point changes. Point changes here, I also really like. It shows that they're like really listening to community like feedback that's kind of been building, things that people really didn't agree with. A lot of people said that Tranquility was too cheap for what it did. As a GAR player, I would agree with that. They did a little points bump. Wat Tambor is probably the only interesting guy here. I'd say he's more of an intentional tank now. They just increased him by 4 points. Whenever I played CIS, if I had an open officer slot for 5 points, he was kind of a good deal. Like if you have a Munificent or a Providence, you just threw him on there because you're gonna repair at some point, and you might as repair twice as good. So now just having him be more of an intentional pick based around like objectives. If you're gonna do like abandoned mining facility as one of yours, I think then's when you take Watt. Otherwise, he's a bit harder to just throw into a list. Ramadi and Agate. Ramadi and Agate, I think, are both good changes because they got points increase, so they're no longer tied with the cheapest commanders in their faction. So that will make like Ozzel more pickable just naturally because now he's the cheapest one. So if you're just needing points and you don't care too much about the effect per se, all of a sudden Ozzel's your go-to. Same with Dodana and the Rebels. 5 points isn't going to make much of a difference on Agate, but at least, she's just not the cheapest auto take for whatever your most expensive ship is in Rebels. Ramadi going up to 8 points, also good. He's a dice add effect commander, and in fact, he stops obstruction in a lot of cases. So he saves you dice. So also really good to see him bump up, and I think 8 points is fair for him, and will provide more variety, and I think commanders we see from these two factions. The other big thing that's point changed is onagers. They went from 96 to 116 and 120 from 110. I think these were really good changes. There's some discussion to be had about if they could have just changed the beam cards instead of the actual ship cards. But I think we're to the point where something kind of needed to change with onagers. So I'm just happy that something happened. And if in the future they need to go back like they did with Rapid Reinforcements to Errata here and like fix stuff and like draw stuff back. In the future, if they're like, this was too much for onagers, we're going to pull it back, whatever. At least they're trying something. What I think this is really good for the game is kind of goes back to what I was starting to get into with Anakin and my experiences teaching new people to the game. The game is great. It's an awesome ship versus ship like combat game. That's what we love about this game. And Anakin and onagers were the two things that kind of broke the mold on that. When you're teaching a new player and they're looking at Anakin. I never flew Anakin. I think most people would say don't fly Anakin against new players, and it was quite obvious why. It's because if someone's just learning the game and you're like trying to get the flow of how the game works, it's like I shoot you, you shoot me, we kind of brawl, we're navving to figure out, get in position. Anakin's whole spiel was the game's about shooting, and what we're going to do is if you play the game with me, I'm just going to shoot you more. So if you shoot me, I shoot you extra. And it really was kind of a negative effect for new players because it's like, okay, I'm learning a new game. It's all about ships fighting ships, except I can't shoot those ships because they just blow me up if I do. I think for the health of the game, it wasn't good. At a competitive level, I think it was fine. I think competitive players, like top of tournaments, stuff like that, they know how to play around Anakin. You had like Sloane, you had boarding troopers, Emperor Palpatine. Uh, Two of those things might have been locked to Imperials. You had Ignition, which was locked to Imperials and other Republic players. Um, but overall, I don't think it was good for the health of the game. And long term, I think it would have had just negative effects to the game because he fundamentally broke like the ship v ship combat rule of the game. And same thing kind of goes with onagers. It's really cool that you get that extra long range ignition shot. Um, and I think new players can kind of handle it because it's at least thematic. It's cool. Um, it's not as bad as I'm just shooting you, so I'm getting shot like 2 or 3 extra times back. This was like, okay, you got a long range ship. How do I deal with that? I think the biggest problem that I had as a new player myself years ago, or even when people start tinkering with this, is they're like, well, 1's good, but 2 is even better. And I think for new players, especially, 2 onagers was a major problem because at that point, you're losing ships very consistently before you even get into range to shoot. So you break the fundamental rule of the ship v ship or squad ship combat by just the fact that before you get into range, you're dead. Even if you have long range dice, like red dice, you're dead before you can get there sometimes. And that, I think, was unhealthy for the game. Once again, highly competitive level. People know how to like dodge arcs. They know like the damage thresholds that onagers have, and you can overcome them. You can beat them. I'm not saying they're unbeatable. I'm just saying for the health of the game and the community, getting new players into the game, it was kind of, I think, a hamper. The double onager, especially. So the points upgrade, points increase. I'm hoping that the double onager kind of shuffles off into the past. You still can technically do it, but I mean, you're mainly going to be flying onagers and a Gazanti and a very light squad ball at that point. I think, and especially also Ramadi was the biggest one. You'd go to a tournament, and some people are just there for fun, and you got someone who's playing competitively because they want to do really well because they're practicing to go to some other tournament or there's an invite for this tournament. And you got someone who's, casual fun, just going there, and you go up against double test bed Ramadi Onager. And it's not a good tournament experience whatsoever. Same thing with the Anakin. It just would really put off those players. And as much as I love the tournament scene, and I'm not super competitive, but I've dabbled with a lot of online stuff and like wanting to do well at these tournaments. Just having to like keep in mind the double onager and how you handle that was a bit much. And honestly, if you can't beat them, join them. You play the double onager. I don't think it was, for me, a positive play experience, like being on the other side of that. Like me being the person to blow up ships before they get to activate didn't seem like a positive, like I don't want to win that way. That's the same reason I never actually played Anakin outside of people asking me to play him. It's because like we're not playing the game. You're just at the table with me and you're sitting there trying to play and I'm just kind of blowing you up. So I think these changes would be super good. It's a start. I still think it could be tweaked. They could have done it where it was just the beans that were updated instead of the cost. They could have just made it so that the onager was unique. You could only have that. But something had to change, and this is the direction they went. I'm happy for it. The only thing I would say, I wish we would have got a rule change for salvoing ignition shots being a thing. That's something I really would like to see as a rule change if you're in range. If you're in long range, you should be able to salvo ignition attacks. Or medium if you have the dice to do it. The only other thing on the health of the game meta watch is the only advantage of the onagers and the Anakins is that they really pushed out the farm hawk. The Starhawk, Krista Agate, that had like 2 Gazantes, a bunch of squads, and they had 2 farming objectives and advanced gunnery. And the thing was, you either pick advanced gunnery and I'll try and chase down one of your ships, and I'll, like, if you fight me, I'll blow you up with advanced gunnery, or you can run away from me and get a 6-5. Like, that's not a game. That's just 2 people sitting around the table for an hour and a half playing keep away. And then if you went with one of the points farming ones, they just sat in their corner farming points, and you either had to have a fleet that you know could beat the Starhawk and table them, or you went in trying to kill them and you blew up, and they also farmed a lot of points, and the Starhawk did quite well. 2 of the fleets that could fight the Starhawk were the Onagers, because you can just blast them as they're farming, or Anakin, with all his damage output, I believe, could have taken on a Krista Agate Starhawk farm list. And I think a lot of that deals with just the strategic option, or strategic ability in some of the objectives. So that's probably more of a change down the road. If farm hawks become popular again, they might have to look at strategic or look at a couple of objectives to not give you that advanced gunnery. What is it? Advanced gunnery, sensor team, and firing lanes are the 3. Sensor something in blue, where they will just sit there and farm, or advanced gunnery. So I think overall, I'm really happy with the changes they made. They made significant and impactful changes to a small amount. They didn't go up there and completely mix up the meta. Like, a lot of people are saying, they could have changed this and that and this and that. And, what about PDX? And 6 cards is a fair number of cards to change point increase, see what happens with the meta, see what becomes the new boogeyman that the community really starts talking about. And if this is going to be, I don't know, a yearly thing where they, pick a couple cards or whatever it is. If they're just doing, 4 to 6 cards at a time, I think that's really healthy. You're not going to, like, break things. It's just enough to shake things up, just enough to, like, see what happens without the risk of, like, completely changing the game and upsetting a lot of people. So that's just my thoughts on this. I'd be interested to see if any of you have comments. If you like the changes. If you don't, if things got too expensive, let me know. Otherwise, you all have a good time.